everybody. Welcome to God's Favorite Sinners. I'm Lauren Trotter.
I'm Justin Hodak.
And we're here with our friend Rebecca today.
Hi, Rebecca.
Justin, how was your week?
It was good. I mean, I don't have any complaints, like I don't. Like everything's just aligned, and it's exactly where it's supposed to be. I think, even since we started doing this, it's just like, really in the acceptance and the patience part, right? Even though it's not on my time, right? Like, it's not on my time, and I want it, right? And I'd be like, it's so funny. I had this thought this morning, like I was working out like this bit in my head, right? It's like, when God, I want to make sure I articulate this right because my mind's kind of mush. It's still early. It'd be like, when God doesn't do things to you, he does things for you, right? But I'm defiant. And I'm like, how do you know what's good for me? Right? Like that, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what's good for me. I know what's good for me. No, I don't, right?
Mm-hmm. No, and we're people who like instant gratification, right? It's like, I want it right here, right now, this moment. Like, I don't want to wait. And God's timing is not quick.
Not quick at all. This guy once said, he's like, Justin, God's an old man. He moves very, very slow. I hated that.
In his own time.
Right?
Yeah, and not in our quick paced time.
God is an old man and he moves very, very slow. But everything always works out. I always tell people I have like a 6-month God. Right? Like my 6-month God is like, why God? Why is all this happening? Why? Right? And he's like, shut up, stupid. I'll tell you in 6 months. And then 6 months later, it clicks, right? And I'm like, oh, shit, that's why this had to happen for me to burn everything fucking down so I can rise from the ashes. And now everything's okay.
Well, it's interesting, though, that you say that because I talk about that all the time, is like right now in my life, right? Like I'm very much in alignment with what I believe my purpose is, right?
Yeah, you are.
But I can look back on the last like 5 years and see where all the different things that I have done are those like puzzle pieces that are falling into play. Like even, for example, a couple years ago, it was like brought to me to do voiceover work, like to record a demo. But like there was nothing in me that wanted to do voiceover work, but for whatever reason, it was clearly like laid out like I was supposed to. And I was like, all right. So I did. And I went through the training and I recorded these demos and then nothing ever happened with it. And I was kind of like, all right, that was a big waste of $5,000 or whatever I spent, right? But now here I am doing this podcast. And when I started doing it and you and I started talking about it, I had this realization that the reason I had done that training was because it helped me learn how to like articulate clearly and like slow down my talking because I talk super fast naturally.
No.
And so it was interesting to like see how that piece kind of fell into play. And, like I'm very much in the waiting. Like my week was, interesting. I've got this nonprofit that's starting and I was like, okay, like now I've got it. And like, I'm going to start doing fundraisers. We're going to do all this stuff. And then I had the realization that I need to wait though, because I'm allowed to function as a 501c3, but that status is pending. And so I can take donations, but if for any reason that status doesn't go through, then those aren't considered donations. So I'm in that waiting, but at the same time, like I talked about last week, I was up for this job that came out of nowhere and I got it this week. So between that and, the couple clients I have left in my other business, that will float me while waiting for the status to come through.
I wish I had your faith. Lauren has such good faith. Like, she's just like, it's okay. Just waiting for my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to come down and get me the job. And I'm just like, huh? What the fuck does that mean, right? Like, I wish that we were talking about it earlier in the apartment. Like, I'm just like, I want to be like Lauren. She's like, what are you going to do? She's like, I'm just leaving all my accounts and I'm going to walk the earth like Cain in Kung Fu. What the fuck does that even mean? I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to eat? How am I going to do this? How am I going to... God will prevail. Yeah. Most people think you're crazy.
They do. And,
But I do, but I don't. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, I do, but I don't. I'm like, she's out of her fucking mind. She's going to be fine. That's it.
And that's the thing, right? So Rebecca goes to a group with me on Thursday nights, and so she sees me every week, right? And she gets like the weekly updates, kind of like you guys do here in Videoland.
Yeah.
And what I actually realized on Thursday night when we were together is because we were talking, and I've been blessed that there are things that come through me to other people that are helpful. Let's do it that way. And, I was getting this feedback about some things, and I had this realization that part of the way that I glorify God, for lack of a better terms, or the way that I share my experiences is by being extremely vulnerable and transparent about my life, right? And in that, though, is that's my walk of faith. Like, I don't just talk about having faith, like I'm actually living it. And that doesn't mean, like, I think it was last Tuesday I had one of those, like, crying moments where I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But it wasn't fear-based. It was just like oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? Type of a thing. And, like, there was some fear in it, but it was definitely more like a release, right? And what that releases is releasing my self-will versus being in alignment with God's will, right? Because no matter how much faith I have, I still have those moments that come up of being like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But the difference is back in the day when I was broke, right? And had all of that, I would have that impending doom thing all the time. Like, I would wake up every morning like, and like have this like anxiety thing going all the time. And like at this point in my life, I don't have any of that. Like 98% of the time we'll say, I have a peace within me that I know that I'm taken care of. I may not be taken care of in the way that I think I should be or that maybe I want to be, but like I know that I am taken care of, and being able to walk this in that kind of faith and be honest and vulnerable and transparent about where I'm at is such a gift to be able to like walk through and then share with people to increase their faith. So with that, I think also Rebecca, who does know me, do you have something you want to add?
I did want to add to that.
Sorry,
because like
cutting off Hodak.
the interesting piece on that, right, is I've known you long enough, like public service announcement, right? Like the person I see today, right? This is what makes it attractive for me, because I am the impending doom, average American. Oh my God, fuck, what am I gonna do, right? Like just like totally, right? And to know like where you've come from, which there's some dark places, right? And the thing I love about Lauren, for the people at home, what I mean, is that Lauren, like I am, the thing that I find distasteful is when somebody tries to shove it down your throat, right? You need to do this. You need to get Jesus. You're going to hell. I'm just like, fucking Mason. You know what I mean? Like, get the fuck away from me, right? Like, it's the most distasteful thing when somebody's trying to force religion or something like down your throat, right? You're a sinner. You're going to hell. You need to fucking do this. But like the way you make it, right? Like you make it attractive. Like the lack of a better term from another place that I know of is attraction rather than promotion, right? Like you walk and like seeing where you come from and how you are today. And she's like, nope, just gonna glide along. And I'm like, how the fuck did she do that? It's a crazy bitch that I used to know. You know what I mean? Like, dude. And then to watch you like do that, and then it makes me like when I'm fucked up in the morning, like just the other day, right? Lord, what do I do? Call Jesus for me. I don't know, right? And then to watch you just, well, Justin, this is what you like. I ask her for the advice rather than her telling me the advice, right? And I'm more apt to listen because I see the way you walk in graciousness and elegance, right? And integrity, right? And that's big, right? For me, like for somebody who's seeking but doesn't want it forced upon me. Because when you force something upon me, I buck.
I'm the same, even with my faith. You know what I mean? Like, the guy's on the corner screaming, yelling, like, you're going to hell if you don't find Jesus. I'm like, let's slow it down a little.
Right.
Like, this is what makes people hate Christians. Hold on here. Like, it's so true. And, I think it's such a blessing to do this podcast with you because you do know old me, too, right? Like, you have seen me since I was, 21 or something, all the way through the progression of, like, change and, like, who I used to be throughout the process of getting to where I am.
Oh, dude, like just crazy person, drunkard, addict, harlot. Harlot's such a nice word.
Harlot sounds really nice and fancy. It wasn't cute.
It's biblical. I had to take something biblical to make myself seem like I'm part of.
$20 blowjob hooker. Let's just be real. Okay, so with that,
with that being said, hi Rebecca.
Hi Rebecca.
Oh, we're so happy you're here.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So,
if you're a harlot, we don't judge.
Thank you.
We're just letting you know. Yeah.
So our podcast is about seeking, right? It's about that walk. It's that walk of what that looks like. And so, kind of to begin, I always say, like, what's good is just kind of like, how were you raised? Or like hearing us kind of banter back and forth, whatever's coming to you. I'm a big fan of like letting this be whatever it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, like what kind of, you are a Christian. Mm-hmm. And so, now, but obviously you haven't always been.
Nope.
No. So it's kind of like what your path has been, what's your journey been, and whatever comes to you.
So I would say I grew up in like a household where there was all these different opinions and different ways of seeing the world, and it was more like a cultural Christianity, or how I would describe it as religious. So it's like more on the exterior, but not always living inside.
Where are you from?
From Switzerland.
Are you from Switzerland?
I'm also French and American.
Wow, the place of neutrality.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, do tell.
I love that. And, so I grew up in different ways. It was not very present directly because my parents separated when I was a kid, when I was 1 year old, and then with my dad, I grew up with him, and he remarried, and that was a really great experience. Because we had new siblings together, and well, not me and my dad, but him and my stepmom, and it was not a part of the conversation. So when I would visit my mom in the U.S., we'd go to church and go to Bible school, and it also felt like it wasn't free to express yourself, and it felt like as if something you said or did was like bad, it would be like, that's bad, so don't do that, and it was very like no, and like very kind of like put it down your throat a little bit,
just like what Justin was talking about, right? Like that's like, you're going to hell if you do this, like you can't do that, and it's all very like regimen.
And it's kind of like just that's bad, and then giving that fear, instilling that fear, but it's not explaining why or the roots of it, or like instead of like nurturing those seeds, it's more like kind of shutting down. So that was my experience in the US, and then going back home, it was more like liberal and free and kind of like, oh, what are you talking about? You want to go to church? What's that about? Like almost making fun of me for wanting to try it out, So it was like kind of these two extremes of how to handle life, and then I just kind of needed to seek and find my way through that. And I've definitely felt a call, but as a kid, I did feel like we were talking about earlier, like, oh my goodness, all these things are happening to me, and I don't have this perfect family situation, and like kind of a victim mentality of, if all this stuff is going on, then where are you, God? Like, where are you? And
I have a question. Were you like, when you wanted to find it like your own way, like were you shamed for that, like wanting to find like God like your own way and like break away from like what your folks instilled with you?
I didn't really have, so in that part of the family where I felt like I was being kind of like where there was a lot of shame and fear. Is that
dad's side or mom's side?
Mom's side.
Mom's side.
Yeah,
okay.
And in that area, it's more like it's not open for discussion. So I didn't really even feel safe to discuss most personal matters, and I would say I didn't feel like I had a genuine connection, and able to have that space to be transparent and process things. And also, I've come to learn that when we're not able to have that with other people, it's just because it hasn't happened within themselves to process that. And sometimes it's like a reminder. So bringing it up is kind of like a trigger for the whole system as a family. So yeah, I just had to like figure it out, and I felt like, oh, this is what I felt like when I was growing up as a teenager, that it was like kind of me against the world, and I had to take it, like carry it all on my own, and this is what it's gonna be like. So I started smoking when I was 12.
Teenage angst.
I started like smoking weed when I was 13, and I was like, the first time I was in a club was when I was 13. Of course I didn't tell my family.
Was this here or in Europe?
In Europe.
Okay, cool. Where it's completely acceptable.
Well, and what we were talking about before, actually, that she was referencing is I was just talking about my past, and as a kid, I had a lot of abuse and neglect and, all that kind of stuff. And so there was a point when I was younger where I didn't necessarily not believe that there was a God, because I think I believed that there was a God since I was a kid, but I just felt like I didn't understand like why all these things were happening to me. And then I had that same experience where it was like, all right, well then I'm on my own. Like I didn't really feel like I had anywhere safe to rely on. And so I had that same like, okay, it's just me against the world and like don't depend on anything. And it's interesting because I think that dependence that I lost was on God, and I saw it as everything else, but that's like really that piece. And then you like go off and you're like, all right, well then I'm just gonna do whatever I want.
Yeah. And it's kind of like almost trying to self-medicate and put a Band-Aid on this wound that's just like catching out of your heart. It's like the only person who can heal it is our divine surgeon, and who is God, and for me now with Jesus. But before even that, I felt like I received healing through God even before accepting Jesus as my savior in my heart. And that is the beauty and the grace that we're extended to every day. And seeing that and learning that was just like, wow. I was like, wow, I was receiving that grace this whole time. That was just so cool to realize that.
And this is where I always love to say, because I say it all the time, that God was with me in the whorehouse, the crack house, and in the church, right? Like I believe God was just as much with me in that piece of my life as he is today. But yeah, Justin.
So these are like, I like to ask the gritty questions, right? Like, like what was the turning point, right? Before, because everybody usually has a turning point, right? Where they just like, whether it's, the alcoholic that hits bottom, or the person that, finds divine grace before. Like, what was it? There's always like that moment, for lack of a better term, moment of clarity, right? Where you're just like, okay, I need to do something here, right? And so what for you, like, what was that? Like, were you headed down a dark path? Did something happen? Like, I like to get to the bones of it.
And wait, there's also sometimes multiples of those, right?
I was gonna
so
say
that was the thing, like
a chain reaction of
shit. So like, where did those places happen throughout, right? Because like I know for me, I've had multiple different divine intervening pieces in my life, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So I would say my first time was, well, as I was talking about being a teenager, I had this whole rebellious side of like not wanting to, kind of wanting to rebel and express my anger. I didn't know how to express my anger. I just had a lot of anger, a lot of hurt that I didn't know how to express, and it was kind of like permeating in my whole life, and I was trying to...
You were trying to buck.
Yeah, I was trying to like, doing all these different... I just noticed I was seeking God's love, but through people and through codependent relationships and through alcohol and blacking out. I've had so many nights where I would just black out, or I had so much anger within me. I remember going up to a guy one day. It was 5 a.m. I was so drunk, and I just straight up, a dude who was really big, way taller than me, and for some reason I thought I could take him on, and I just was like,
I love her.
I was so angry, and I was like, you see this fist? I was like, you see this? And so like, people around me were like, Rebecca, come on, like, you don't want to do this, And I was just like, I had this, like, but I didn't know where to put it, and I didn't know how to manage that, and creating these safe spaces is really beautiful because it allows people to be who they are and where they are on their journey. And so basically around when I was a teenager, I think 17 or 18, I had really big suicidal thoughts. Like it was reoccurring since I was like 13, but it came strong around like at that point. I really felt like there was also divine intervention because I was supposed to be alone that day at home, and I was going to stay at home, and I was like, this is over. But people kept on coming to me. I remember that night even going out on the street. I was like, this is done. I'm going out on the street, walking across, and then someone from school sees me and is like, are you okay? And she just hugs me, she's like, let me bring you back to your friends, and there were so many different instances like that. The next day too, my stepmom and sister weren't supposed to come home, but they felt like they had to come back, and that's how they brought me to the hospital that day to see a psychiatrist.
Now during that time, did you see it as being like divinely led, or is that something that you see like later on looking back?
Oh no, you see that later on.
Right.
Yeah, the hindsight is always 2020.
Yeah.
Well, what was bringing on that darkness, right? That's like a darkness, like when you want to, like, when you're getting to that, like, what do they call it, the supreme sacrifice, right? Like what was that? What led to that darkness?
I'd say it's mostly thoughts and lies that were fed since I was a kid, but also that I was accepting in my mind of unworthiness and not belonging and not being able to receive the love, or it was kind of like I was seeking God's love, and I was seeking it in my external environment without seeing all of his outpour that he could give to me.
Would you elaborate, like, on the thoughts and the bullshit that you were being fed? Because I think it would help a lot of people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like, if you feel okay to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
So I'm just trying to think of, for instance, like an example. I was a kid, I was a girl, and I would cry, and I'd have like big moments of tantrums and feelings that were coming up to the surface. And you'd say as a kid that's a normal thing, right? And sometimes it is. Teenager was getting like even more and more, because it's almost like my child was screaming like, I need to breathe, I need space, you know, I need this love, like I need something to feel like
I need a hug.
I need a hug. Yeah, that's sometimes it was just about needing a hug, and the reactions I would get would be like, don't cry, you're being a baby, like,
I'll give you something to fucking cry about.
Yeah, I'll give you something to cry about. So even like as an adult starting to process that later on, I'd still have these impending thoughts without anyone telling me it, but it's still here of like, I'm not allowed to cry right now. I have so much to be grateful for. Who am I to cry right now, you know? And actually there's a beautiful thing that I learned, is that God gathers each and every single tear that we have and just keeps it in his heart, and it's just kind of like that release, and I seeing it as beauty. Because even growing up, I felt like, no, it's a good thing that I'm crying. I'm letting it go, you know? And sometimes it's also a societal thing of feeling like, oh my goodness, this is too much is going on here. But it's actually like, you can cry tears of joy too. And I learned that later on, just a few years ago.
And Rebecca and I were just talking this last week actually about anger, right? Mm-hmm. And so like, you and I have similar like childhoods in the sense of like having these emotions that we didn't really know what to do, and then what it turns into is anger, right? Mm-hmm. And then especially as women, like anger is not an acceptable emotion a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's this like, you know,
unless they're hungry,
kind of passive, yes. We're supposed to be kind of, you know, passive and smiley and happy, and like that eats away at us though, right? And that festers and turns into all kinds of things, and it's that stifling of emotions, whatever they are. Like I know I work with a lot of women a lot of times on processing emotions, no matter what they are, do you know what I mean? And knowing that every emotion that happens has value, right? Yeah. And so that's a lot of like what we're talking about, is like when we get to those suicidal points, or when we have those outbursts of anger, you know, because I'm a blackout rager too, and like I can snap in a second and lose my mind. Not really anymore, but I used to. Shatter people's noses and such, or pull knives. It's weird. And you know, but it's that like festering that like bubbles up and then pours. So from there, like going on, what other experiences have led you to where
I am today? Yeah, absolutely. So then I kind of, after moving to LA, which was in 2019, right before the pandemic.
By yourself?
I moved out here by myself, yeah. It was my first time. Came here with 2 suitcases. And
welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
At least you didn't end up in Chatsworth.
I have no idea where that is.
And that, my dear, is a blessing.
Sorry to everyone who lives in Chatsworth. Don't mind Justin.
Don't mind Justin.
And, so coming out here, actually, there's so much going on in the spirituality sense in LA. And I was kind of taken to different directions. Oh, back forward, right before moving to LA, I did start a meditation practice where I was meditating 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And I was very diligent about that. And I felt like that was really helping me. And it really started giving me deeper experiences of joy, to feel like I could have that time in silence and appreciate and start kind of melting away those thoughts that are so noisy in my mind throughout the day. And so coming to LA, I was still...
What did you come to LA for?
For acting.
And that's where not to anybody who lives in Chatsworth, that was the comment about Chatsworth, because usually that's where the other studios are and where they're going to make you a star. Just a joke. And action.
Let's go. So we're in LA and we're kind of like discovering different things, and there's a lot of things going on, and I started meeting different people related to other systems of belief, and I was curious. I was seeking, and I really wanted to discover more.
So at this point, though, you're not necessarily a Christian per se, right?
No.
Like you're just kind of searching, right?
Yeah, I
so
had
like,
grandmothers like who were like, "Oh yeah, go to church," and so I was like, "No."
So
like,
were you actually searching at the time, or was it an internal belief that there is something? Because that's always where I'm at, right? Like, for a long time, it wasn't searching per se, right? It was that something was out there, but I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but I wasn't necessarily turning my back on the idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think she's actually searching.
Oh, you're
like,
searching at
like
this point.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are searching at this point.
I'm searching, trying to understand, but it's also like that search also relates to an inner search too, of understanding, looking back at my story and looking back at things, and acting too. You need to learn how to use your body's your instrument, right. So you need to learn how to use your body and connect to your body. And what I realized in the beginning was I was so disconnected to my body that every time I'd do a few minutes of relaxation, I would start sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I remember a teacher kept on saying like, you know, if you keep on crying every time you're relaxing, you probably should try therapy, you know? But it was like in a nice way, but she was like, I used to have a student who'd cry a lot and they ended up needing therapy, like kept on nudging that not directly telling me like, hey, go, but I heard that, and I actually did start a few years back right after the pandemic started, because it was this whole... It's almost like you're opening Pandora's box, and then there's this other thing, and then there's this other thing, and there's this other thing that needs healing to...
Unpacking.
Yeah, a lot of unpacking, and a lot of also taking responsibility for my mistakes and the role I played in each situation, also with my thoughts and victim mindset and suicidal thoughts, because no one can take responsibility for those thoughts but me, especially because they're lies. So I can't expect anyone else to change that in me. That's the part that I really need to work on, the emotional side. So that was kind of the search that was going on, and at the same time there was just a curiosity. I started doing yoga and different things like that, and just felt like I was feeling a groove. And then I wonder, I'm just trying to think when I started going to church, and when was that?
And what happened right before, and what was the decision to like start going to church?
I remember my grandmother's my French grandmother,
That's your mom's side?
That's my dad's side, yeah.
Dad's side, okay.
She kept on nudging, like, oh, go to church, you'll meet some great people, and I was like, no, like, I didn't feel like, no, I didn't feel right at that time, and oh no, this is what happened. I remember, because you know when we were talking about hitting a rock bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
he wants the bottom.
We've hit gold. Eureka.
We've hit gold. So basically, I was changing, and I felt like I was getting to healthier habits, and then all of a sudden, I have a test that shows up, and it's like, let's see how much you're ready. And
what kind of test?
So
what was his name?
It was that's a great question.
It's usually him.
What was his name? Yeah.
So I don't know.
You don't have to say it. No. It was a yeah. You don't have to say anybody's name on camera. No. It's the test. I mean, what was his name? I'm saying it in the not in the literal, but the
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was like kind of that very like passionate thing of like fusion since the beginning, and it's like, oh my goodness, you feel like there's so much that's going on there. And it was again part of me that was still out of fear seeking God's love through another person, And that lasted not even a month, but it felt so strong, so intense, and it really felt like at the moment when I was going through it, it felt like it was meant to be. And
it always does.
Yeah.
All 17 times.
120.
Yeah. So obsession.
Yeah, basically, kind of.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like, I remember the emotions I was feeling. I was experiencing a lot of panic, a lot of anxiety, especially feeling panic and anxiety without being with the person. And I really felt like I was receiving messages of, be careful, I think there's like other things that are going on out of the picture. And when I would confront that, it was a lot of like, no, like not accountability, but it was a beautiful mirror to me, to things that I was not willing to see in myself. Because I realized through that experience as well that I needed to receive it in open hands. As soon as I realized that that's what it was, in the beginning I didn't realize, but then I started realizing, and I'm like, oh, I need to take responsibility for what's going on right now and how I'm welcoming this into my life. And
I have a question, if I may. Was this the first time that ever happened? Because some of us are slow learners.
It's not.
It wasn't the first time.
It was. I had a couple of times where.
But this one, you really saw it. This was the time that you were able to be more accountable.
Yeah.
Was it because of the therapy, or was it because of the seeking, or was it?
Yeah, it was thanks to all of these different things, that especially the like writing things down at face value of different patterns and relationships. Because I had done that during the pandemic. Everything was closed down. I was like, I'm gonna start opening this and working on the things I need to change to welcome the.
So it's like an inventory process.
Yeah, an inventory process. Oh yeah, kind of like exactly what you were talking about. I did that,
and I think also like the one thing that I was just thinking about too is that like you were talking about how you were feeling while you were in it, right? Where you have the anxiety and you have the fears and you have all that stuff, and like that's our internal barometer of us looking for things in the wrong places, right? Like, and I think that's easier obviously to look at in retrospect, but it is also the thing that guides my life these days, is that things that give me that feeling I know are not in alignment with what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And from my past experiences, when you are engaging in things that you know in the core of your being are not in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, it ends up coming out in all different kinds of ways.
Oh, it manifests in just chaos.
Yeah. And it's one of those, like I say all the time, right? Like if you don't process your feelings, they process you. And like circumstances happen that force you to have those feelings and process them. So you're in the middle of this, and then what happens?
You're taking an inventory.
Oh yeah, that was like more of like, oh yeah, back forward, I took an inventory before that happened. So I guess that the only sheer fact that I wrote that down, each person I was with, and to write not only what hurt me in those instances, but also what I participated in, and because how I was showing up as well. And
so you had insight.
That helped me have more insight. So when it came in the beginning, I didn't realize right away. And if you ask me, I'd prefer to tell you, yeah, I knew right away, right off the bat. You know, you want to learn your lessons quickly, but sometimes
some of us are slow learners,
and that's okay. That's part of the process. And
very slow learners.
And when I started realizing that, I remember just feeling a lot of tears, and it brought me to these experiences. Whenever I see that something is taking me away from God, I see it as a beautiful way of bringing me back closer to Him every time, and that gives me comfort in knowing that instead of beating myself up for mistakes I've done in the past, that every single thing He knows anyways, and He's like, that just brought you closer to me every time. And really looking at that, because every time allowing His love to bring me comfort and peace rather than the thing I'm seeking in that moment out of myself, really taught me how much love is going to continue coming, and how much grace continues every day.
So how did you come to your faith?
Oh yeah, so that was right after that situation.
So it brought you to your knees, basically.
Yeah, it brought me to my knees. It brought me to my lying on the floor on my back. I really like doing that too. Just kind of like be like, okay, I can't do anything but appreciate.
Rebecca's way of like surrendering is always laying down on the ground.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
her thing.
Whole body on the ground.
Mine
in
is
the
too, but
dirt.
usually handcuffed.
And so basically I went to church in that time frame where it was like shifting, and I had realized that there was a big change.
So walk me through that process, right? Because like, so you hit this surrender, right? Well, when you're in like for me, like I can only speak from experience. When I'm in surrender, I'm in pain, right? And I'm looking for a solution. So I go to the solution, right? But I'm trying to be in the solution. So for you, your solution is going to the church, right? When I'm in the solution, though, it doesn't happen overnight. Like I'm still in pain, vibrating while I'm there. Walk me through that process.
Yeah, so I remember going to church, and I felt so loved there, and I felt like, oh my goodness, this is such a beautiful place, that it's not about religion. I felt
Did you feel worthy of it when they were giving it to you?
Yes,
okay.
I felt like I was like, thank you, and I didn't accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior that day. Like it took me a few months before I did, because in the beginning I was just like, okay, I'm staying open, and this is like, I'm hearing it, and this is in alignment with what I've been hearing in other instances related to unconditional love. And
did you fight it all between the serenity and the sickness while you were finding that path?
Did I fight it?
Did you like, were you torn, like, between the serenity and the sickness?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do feel like that, because it's almost like it became an identity, part of me that felt so attached to me that who am I without it? It almost feels like, oh my goodness, by surrendering this, it's a big piece of myself that's just gonna come out, and then I have like, it's feel like expressing like, this is gonna be the unknown, and it's gonna be new, and that's okay.
And Rebecca and I have very similar experiences, because we do go to the same church, and I had the same experience at the church when I started going there like 12 years ago. Of feeling like super welcomed and super loved, and then like I went back and forth between my two lives for quite a while before I like fully surrendered into like where I am now. But
see, that always freaks me out, right? Like for me, like when I go and like it's just so warm and it's so, what I mean? I'm just like, I don't know if I deserve this.
I think that depends on where you are, though, too, right? Because I mean, I get that sense of feeling. But yeah, I'm, Rebecca and I think have similar experiences. So you came in, and then, let's talk a little bit about the experience of one surrendering, right, to God's will, right, and it's interesting to get into this part of the conversation, right? Because everyone has their own experiences, and it's a process as anything else, right? Like this is a big thing that I talk about all the time, is just because I turned my life over to Jesus Christ and decided he was my Lord and Savior, in that instant, I did not become Christ-like. Do you know what I mean? I still continue to have sex with people. I still continue to act out in all different kinds of ways. Like there was definitely, there has been a process of letting go of my own self-will and my own like fleshly desires, and getting into alignment with God's will for me, and listening to that voice internally of telling me what's right or wrong, or, comfortable or uncomfortable, or good or bad, or however you want to look at it. There is definitely a process to that. And it definitely, I've talked about this even at the church when I did my testimony, is that, just because we are saved, or, however you want to phrase that, and like, hit this bottom and this surrender, doesn't mean that instantaneously, like, everything changes. Like, there is a walk and a path that we have to go through in order to let go of these pieces of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I've been blessed enough to be with you on this walk while you have been growing and changing right in front of me.
Where were you in your process when she showed up at the door?
So I was very much in my process, actually, because she came around the time that I did my testimony for the church. And so, so the first time I met Rebecca, actually, she prayed over me, because I was going through a difficult time, and I didn't know her, and I came to my friend Heather and asked her for prayers.
So she was there before you, or you were there before her?
I was there before her, but I hadn't met her. She actually, so there's 2 churches on the campus of our church. There's a main church, and there's a church for the minors, for the teenagers. And she was working with the teenagers at the time. And my other girlfriend was there. And so I came over actually to get some prayers, and Rebecca ended up praying over me that day, and then we have been friends ever since. So just real quick around the process of walking with Christ, right? The process of surrendering, and I always want to be careful when I get into this part, right? Because it's not the like, it's the growing and changing towards being in alignment with God's will.
Yeah,
right.
It can get messy still. It's
super
so
messy. So let's get a little bit into like what that experience has been for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so also too, it relates a lot to what you were saying about feeling like, oh my goodness, it feels so overwhelming, all this love, that I don't feel like I'm even worthy to receive it. I've experienced that a lot, and the main thing that was blocking me when I was asked about my journey with Jesus, it just came up one day, because one day the music, I felt like the Holy Spirit was moving in me, and I just was like, oh my goodness, I think I have to forgive this person. And for me, it was like a whole discovery. I was like, what? I didn't even realize that had to happen, and it was so strong. So I went up to someone and I was like, I think, can you help me pray over me or something, because I feel like I need to forgive this person specifically. And then he was like, oh, and of course I'd love to. And then he started asking me, I don't know about your journey, how's your journey? And he asked me a few questions, and he's like, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And then I said,
and you had been coming to church for months, like you had been coming and like participating
and volunteering,
but you weren't ready to commit.
But I wasn't ready, because, and then he was like, okay. And what, is there something keeping you from it? What do you feel like is keeping you from that? And I said, because I don't feel like I'm worthy of it. And I didn't even it wasn't fully in my awareness. It was still in my back thoughts, but I didn't really voice it that way. And then when he was like, oh, but he wants you. He was like, he wants to be with you. And that was just, it felt like I was really it felt scary in the moment, because I still was so rooted in those unbeliefs, and the lies that I keep on talking about, these negative thoughts. And that day it felt like a huge transformation inside was happening in my heart without me understanding it. But also today, it's been almost a year. It'll be a year on November 14th that I prayed Jesus in. And also, I want to see it as he was pursuing me my whole life, but I just wasn't receiving him. And now today, I'm still reprocessing negative thoughts, and I'm still struggling with thoughts of unworthiness, and I'm writing down, and even yesterday I was journaling, and I had all this, still a lot of resentment and anger, and I'm like, where is this coming from? It's like, okay, I need guidance, and I need freedom in how I'm gonna write, and a lot of thoughts that are still holding on in my mind came up that I didn't even realize were just playing, almost like a tape that's in the background that is not making a lot of noise, but it starts getting louder and louder, especially as it's trying to knock on the door, hey, I have a story to tell, It's
on a loop. You build a case. Yeah.
And I was talking to someone this morning actually that I think God is always tapping at us, and it's waiting for us to listen. Right? And it's that getting quiet, and the willingness, and the open, and the transparency, and the honesty, and surrounding ourselves with people who make us feel safe is where we're able to heal and really build our relationship with God. So I think that's pretty rad for our podcast, actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions for young Rebecca?
Anything else to say?
I just want to say I'm super grateful for both of you. It seems like you're doing a great thing here together, and I love the interaction, the openness, and vulnerability. So thank you for having me.
Thanks.
It's our pleasure. So
thanks everyone for
coming. Thanks everyone for coming. See us next week. We'll have a different guest, and have a great week.
Thanks.